Hello, it's me! I was in Normandy. We're in Normandy. It's Christmas time, friends. It's Christmas time. And this means that we need Christmas trees. The problem is, I don't have one and I do not bother buying one. So why don't we use the magic of visual effects to place a Christmas tree inside real footage? Keep in mind, I'm really familiar with Blender. Familiar. Jesus Christ. Keep in mind, I'm really familiar with Blender. I work with Blender a lot, but camera tracking and visual effects composition is something that I did not do a lot of times. So let's learn together and let's see how we can achieve this. So I started my journey by recording my apartment and trying to use Blender for the 3D camera tracking, but it turned out to be a nightmare, so I decided to use After Effects, which I'm more familiar with. In After Effects, the tracking is really smooth and easy. I just dragged my 3D camera tracker onto my footage, and after 1 or 2 minutes my camera track was ready. I then created a 3D camera. I didn't bother dialing in the specs of my camera, although it is not good practice. If you want a really good track, you should dial in the specs of your camera. I then selected more points and created a solid on the ground. This will later help me create a proper shadow catcher and a ground plane if necessary. After I was done in After Effects, I needed a way to export all of my tracking data and import it into Blender. Unfortunately, this task is not as straightforward as it should be. But to our rescue comes an add-on which you can install in After Effects and in Blender. It's totally free, I will link it in the description, which will help us with exporting our data and importing it into Blender, and it's really easy to use. After importing everything into Blender, I started blocking out the room and creating a proper ground plane, which will later serve as the shadow catcher. I used the Blender Kit add-on to download a nice 3D Christmas tree and place it onto my previously created ground plane. When I felt the 3D tree was properly positioned, I began to recreate the light sources in the room. The cheap trick was to use a still from the raw footage as an HDRI, which will serve as an environment light and increase the realism. I altered the overall materials a little bit and created a nice glowing effect by cranking up the emission value of the Christmas tree light material. At this point, I could have rendered the sequence for the final touch in After Effects, but I decided to add a light reflection on the ground to enhance the overall realism. Achieving this turned out to be quite challenging. Blender's shadow catcher does capture light sources, but only from light objects, not from emission materials, which I used for the Christmas tree lights. To work around this, I created a new render layer to isolate the light reflection. This layer will be composited on top of the image later in After Effects. To give it the special Christmassy touch, I added some snow by creating a particle emitter on a flat plane and adjusting its properties until the particles resembled falling snow. After experimenting with the emitter properties for a while, I achieved a result that I was happy with. At this point, I was ready to render out the sequence. What does look like a smooth process in the video took several attempts, because I always noticed that something was missing, so I came back and adjusted. After the 4th attempt, I finally had my final image sequence, and I was ready to import it back into After Effects for the final compositing. In After Effects, the only task was to composite my different render passes and hope for a good result. The tricky part was definitely the light reflection, but after some experimentation, I managed to create something that was pleasing to my eyes. As you may notice before, there are a few objects that intersect the CGI output, so I had to mask them out, which I did with the help of a trackable mask in After Effects. And after a tiny amount of color grading, I finally had my final result. Well, so this is it, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I think it took me almost 4 or even 5 hours in total. So, was it worth it? Well, probably not. It would have been easy to just pick up a Christmas tree. But nonetheless, I learned a lot of things and I enjoyed the process, and this is what's important, right? I do not really think that this matters that much. I doubt that anyone will ever care about it, but if you saw my videos of the past in which I played bass for the most part, you will think, what the heck is this guy posting now? A totally unrelated video, and yes, this is totally unrelated. This is something that I did not post on this channel. I thought for a long time if I should continue the YouTube journey, and in case I should, how? But long story short, I decided to make this channel more of a personal project channel instead of a music-focused niche channel. I will probably upload a follow-up video in which I will explain my decision in more detail, because I think it's important, also for other YouTubers, because I think that this is a common problem. You have a YouTube channel or you have a business and you see yourself in a niche and you put yourself in a niche and you limit yourself because of the niche. But this is not how life works. We are humans, we change interest, we change ambitions, and I think in order to have a more authentic experience and a more authentic approach and outcome, the channel should reflect my personal journey a little bit more. So until then, thank you for watching this video, consider subscribing and giving a thumbs up in case you like it, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, bye bye.